Professor, I would like to ask you, what's the main challenge of education in your country, the United States?
I think the main challenges in the United States are to improve the equity of the system, that there are still a lot of schools that are not performing very well, although there are some schools that do perform very well. So even then, on average, it brings the average down. So if you look at a lot of European countries, I think the scores are higher and most schools do well, most schools perform well. Whereas I think in a country like the United States, there's still some regions, there's still some areas, there's still some types of schools that don't do as well as the other types of schools. So the challenge is, how do you reach those types of schools and make them perform as well as the others?
And how to do that?
I don't know. You know, I think that there have been many attempts to do that. And so the honest answer is, I think we don't know as well how to do that as we should. We've tried many things that are good ideas in the United States and in Brazil. And you look at the history of education reform, people know that this is important, so every 5 years there is a different solution. The thing is that the solutions are often created at a very high level. In the United States, they'll be created in Harvard, or they'll be created in Washington, D.C. But the problems are often in small towns in Louisiana, or small rural towns in Kansas. And those towns don't have the same problems. Sometimes they'll have a problem because the school is a rural school in an agricultural area and you can't get any teachers, or the students have to come long distances to school. Sometimes the problems are in inner city New York City, where the school is dangerous to attend and there are too many kids. Different problems, different places. And if you have one solution for everybody, it's not going to meet anybody's needs. And I think the same problem is a problem here in Brazil, is a lot of the reforms are crafted at very high level, but the problems are very localized. And it means that your solutions have to come with a mix of outside ideas and local ideas and local buy-in. And they have to come together, and sometimes I think we don't know how to make that happen. So when it does happen, it's almost like a miraculous intervention, something that happens by luck. So what we need to do is we need to work out, how do we make it so that it's not about luck, but that we understand how to do that as well. I think it's really important, because at the end of the day, education is about the interaction between the teacher and the student and the teacher and the broader family. So if your teacher is missing in action and your teacher isn't engaged, you have a big problem. Now, you see this firsthand in Africa. The number one problem with education in Africa is the teachers don't come to school. So it's not about students not coming to school, the teachers don't come to school. So there's nobody there to teach the children. And that's the main reason why Africa is so far behind. But a problem in a lot of places is the teachers don't have the education themselves. They can't teach properly. Or that the teachers are overworked, and after a number of years they just don't have the ability to care anymore. Or that the teachers get so used to working in the ways that they've worked for a long time that they aren't open to change. And when you have that problem and the teacher isn't willing to move to a new place, it becomes very difficult, because they're the ones who do the instruction, and education is about instruction. So that's when I speak about the local context. I'm speaking very much about the principals and the teachers, because I think that where principals and teachers realize that they need to change and start the change process, I would almost venture to say you will always end up with success. Because as long as they are willing to do it, they will work out a solution that works for their place. They know the children better than anybody else, they know their problems better than anybody else, and they also know what capacities they have to be able to address the problems. People from the outside who tell teachers what to do, they don't know what teachers can and can't do, they don't know what the problems are. So the teachers are really important.
And how to make they to realize they need to change sometimes?
So I think one of the things that you want to do is you want to have something that gets the teachers to care. And sometimes it's just the realization that things aren't going that well. In Brazil right now you have PISA scores that say that the country is not where people want the country to be. So the question is, how many of the teachers even know what a PISA score is? How many of them read the PISA scores? And how many of them care about the PISA scores? And how do you make them care about the PISA scores? So in some schools, for example, if the teachers don't perform very well, if their students are failing, the teachers will be penalized. And if the teachers do well, the teachers will receive benefits. In other places, you just depend upon the idea of the teacher wanting the students to succeed. So sometimes scores are an important thing. The other thing where you can motivate the teachers is by seeing the results of what they do. So if your students are leaving school and they're going to university or they're getting jobs, and you can see that they're succeeding in life, that's going to be a motivating factor. The biggest problem, I think, is where you have schools where the teachers have got used to failure. Failure is just part of what we do, and where they have excuses. So, you know, some teachers will say, well, you know, you can't expect me to do better because I'm at a big school and I don't have any money and we don't have textbooks. And the students, they don't come from very clever houses. All of those excuses become ways in which they think that make it very difficult to get them motivated to actually change. And that, I think, is one of the big problems, I think, in Brazil, my observations, is that a lot of the teachers, they have excuses and expectations that they will fail, so it becomes okay to do that. So you need to change the narrative, is what I call, which is the story. What is the story of education? And the story of education should be, students shouldn't fail, they should succeed, and the job of teachers is to make them succeed. So if students are failing, teachers are failing, and they need to take responsibility for that. Changing that story so people think differently takes time, but there are some ways in which you can do it. And that's one of the things that in my research I spend time trying to study. How do you put things into the classrooms, into the meeting room, into the meetings, into the training of teachers that make them think differently about what they do? Because they are the energy in the classroom. They are the ones who have to do the work. Let me give you two answers. In Brazil, it's a very serious issue because you do not have enough money in education. It is very, very small. Teachers do not get paid enough. There is not enough money for the students in the classrooms. The buildings are not of good enough quality. So there is a level at which, below which, money is a very serious problem. You can't do anything. Above that, I think money is no excuse. So I think that there's two answers. The one answer is that money needn't be a constraint and that you will never have enough money. So you always have to make sure that you do the best with what you have. But the second part of it is that you do need a minimum. And I don't think that that is being provided in Brazil right now.
Well, what you're saying is that money is important, but not just money.
Not just money. It isn't the most important thing, and it needn't be the kind of excuse and the constraint that people call it. So I think it's another thing that, you know, the biggest problem you have with money here is because schools and teachers don't get very much money. It is the thing that they will complain about all the time. And instead of actually working out a solution to teach better, what they'll do is they'll just tell you that they don't have enough money. So the problem that you have if you're making a policy is how do you get past that discussion to say to them, stop talking about money, let's just solve the problems. And it's almost like while you have that big block in the way, it's always going to stand in the way of actually real discussions about reform.
How important do you think is to have a committee, to get a group of teachers to discuss and to try to change the way that things are done at school?
I think it's very important. I don't think it matters if it's a committee or if it's a social group that meets after work in a bar. People do things when they work together. And Some people think that change happens by one person, by Superman. In all of my research, that is not true. In all of my research, what matters is that you have a group of people who have common interests and who have shared problems and who work together to solve the problems. Because the people in the group, they bring different things. You know, some of them will bring an idea, some of them will bring a contact to get money, some of them will bring more time over the weekend to be able to write things. And you need all of those people together. They also give each other courage, you know, to do brave and courageous things. If you want to change, some people aren't going to like you. And it's easier if some people don't like you if you're in a group than it is if you're an individual. So I think actually this is one of the things that I would say people who are interested in educational reform need to learn about. The way in which you get reform is building these groups. Coalitions, teams, committees, whatever they look like, putting people into groups where they can talk, they can get ideas, they can get courage. Very important to do. It's like a soccer team. You know, no soccer team would win if they just had one player. Even Lionel Messi is just one player. He's Argentinian. I should use a Brazilian example.
I heard you talk about the important issue. You just said in your speech that it's important to know what education is about.
Yeah.
I would like to hear about that. What do you mean when you say that it's important to know what education is about?
Very simple question to ask is, why do children go to school in Brazil? Why, as a 15-year-old in Salvador, why would I go to school? Why would parents send their children to school? Some people, when you ask the question, they say to you, that's a stupid question, because you send your children to school. Well, that's not a good enough answer. You need to know, what is education about? Is education just about 12 years of your life where you have to go and sit in a classroom and listen? Or is education about empowering your mind so that you can get a job, so that you can take the country to another place? It's two different stories. I like to call it the narrative. And you have to have a narrative so that people understand, why am I sending my children to school? Why am I going to school? And that politicians understand, why are we spending money on schools? That teachers understand, why is it that I am teaching in a school and not getting much money? People need to have a story. And that story needs to be about the country, and it needs to be about the future. And at the moment, whenever I ask people that question in Brazil, I don't get very many answers. I worry that there isn't much of a narrative. You need to have a story that is about success, where you know, why are they there? And as soon as you have the story that says, look, we're here to teach them so that they can be productive, then you have to ask them, well, what do you teach them? And that changes then the way you think about what happens in the classroom, because every lesson you have to know, how does it fit into the story? How did today fit into where I'm taking them at the end of the day? And it should fit into the culture of the country as well. And it is very important. And stories are also important for change. That people often change because they're moving towards something that they believe in. And you're never there, you have to move there. So what you need to do is you need to give them the thing to believe in. You need to say to them, this is what the education system could look like. Imagine if 90% of the people were passing. Imagine if the average ability in maths in Brazil was the same as in Japan. Imagine what Brazil would look like. Imagine how quickly our economy would grow. Imagine how many jobs we would have. Now that's what I'm talking about with a story that's about education. At the moment, I think the story is a very limited one. There's not much imagination. It's almost like education is something you have to do because you have to do it. It's kind of like Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of the State in the United States. And they asked him once about soccer. And they said, football. They said, tell us about your experience of nations. And he said, a nation's soccer team will tell me a lot about their country. And he said, the Brazilians have a bright yellow shirt. He said, because they like excitement. And he said, the players are out and they play a very flamboyant game. And he said so much so that sometimes he thinks they forget to score because they're doing so much. Now that's a story about Brazilian soccer, okay? And people understand that story. But then he said, I've never seen a good Brazilian goalkeeper. And he said, because I think that the role of goalkeeper is offensive to the Brazilian story because it is a purely defensive job that makes no sense if you are flamboyant. So what I was saying is I think that education has become almost like the goalkeeper. And people are excited about, what you're doing in certain sectors and industries and policies. But then you get to education and it's something that, well, we have to have it. So, we have to have it in the budget, so we'll give it some money, but not very much. And we have to have teachers, so we'll hire them, but we're not going to train them very much. Instead of saying, wow, this is the key part of our story, so let's put it up at the front and let's make it the center forward. And that's what I think needs to be done. The narrative needs to change. It needs to be more aggressive. It needs to be part of the success of the country. And right now, I think it's getting there, but it's not there right now.
Is that a task for teachers to identify what education is about for their students?
I think it's a task for everybody. But I think that it is, I think that everybody has something in their head. I would use a different word. I think that a narrative could be a tool for the people who care about reform. Because I think that if, instead of developing all of these methods of planning and all of these, rather create a story and start to then go and speak to the teachers and get them to believe that story. You can't start a narrative with 10 million teachers. You have to start a narrative somewhere centrally and then you have to communicate it out to people. So I think it could become a tool or a vehicle for the change. My guess is that if you go to schools, you'll find some teachers who have a great narrative. They have a great story. Some teachers are there, they're young, they're 21, they're 22, and they think they're going to change the world. The problem is that in 3 years' time, they might leave. So what you need to do is you need to pick them up when they're that young, get that story and make that the story. So then maybe they'll stay there for a long time.
Professor, how important is the play, how important is the presence of the family, the parents at school? They help when they get involved?
Absolutely. Parents are very important because, again, this is about relationships. It's important to have parents involved in the school. It's more important to have parents involved in the life of their child. So, I think you could have a very good school where the parents aren't very involved, but where they're involved in the life of the child. So when the child comes home, they are telling the child that school matters. They're helping the child to do her homework. They are encouraging her to succeed. They're watching who her friends are. They're watching what she's seeing on the TV. That's important because, the children are getting a lot. They're spending more time at home often than they are at school. And they learn a lot from their parents too. When the parents get involved in the school, what it does is it expands the capacity of the school. You think about it. A school is like any organization. It needs to manage money, right? Are teachers trained to manage money? Never. Teachers are trained to teach history or geography. So who manages the money in the school? Oftentimes it is the teacher on the weekend by himself. So they don't do a very good job. So what happens in wealthier schools is that the parents who have more time and who work in businesses, they sit on the board and one of them will manage the money. Why? Because that's what he does. He knows how to do it. For him, it takes him 3 hours a week to manage the school finances. And there are many, many other examples like that. So now what happens is now they have a money manager in the school, happens to be a parent. Now the other reason why it's good is that because he's a parent, he actually cares how the teachers are teaching his kids. So he holds them accountable. Do you know what I mean? So as soon as you get the parents involved, they bring a lot of skills, they bring a lot of energy, they bring a lot of time. At my own child's school, the playground equipment is fixed by the parents. I'm part of a team of fathers, and we go on a Sunday once a year and we fix the playground equipment. So what that means is that the school doesn't have to hire people to do that because we're there. So it means that they can use the money in the library or some other place. It also means that I care about the playground because I built it. Do you know what I mean? So if someone messes up with the playground, I, as a parent, am going to say to them, don't do that. And I'm going to go to the principal and say, whoever did that needs to be punished. They need to know that that's not okay. So it changes the relationship between the school and the community as well.
And do you believe it's important, works if, for example, the community get involved?
Yes, so and there are very easy ways to get involved. And I think it does help you as well. It helps you to have a good school. It's interesting that if you have schools that have successful sports teams, the community will usually go and watch them, right? Because it brings prestige to the community. We need the same way of thinking about schools that produce good students. That the community must support that. They must get involved. So again, part of it is just the community saying you matter and it's important. The other part is if the community is involved, if you're involved with the school on your corner, you can bring more capacity, you can bring your abilities, you can bring your talents to help that school. And we know that capacity is a problem in Brazilian schools. We know that they don't have enough people, they don't have enough time. So you know, if you volunteer for an hour a week to do something around the school, you probably find it will make a very, very big difference. And it'll help you too, because the whole community will start to strengthen. The quality of the children will start to improve. They will come out better educated, so capable of having better jobs. I think it is very important. The other thing, and this is a message for the business people, businessmen and women in Brazil. As Brazil grows, where are they going to get their talent? Where are the people going to come from? They're going to come from the schools. The people who are in school now, who aren't getting good PISA scores and who aren't performing very well, those are the people you will hire. My question to the business community is that okay? And the answer should be no. You know, if you want to run world-class businesses and if Brazil wants to become a world-class business hub, you need good people. And the business community, if it gets involved in schooling, not necessarily even in money, but sometimes just in helping to push for change, could be extremely powerful. And it is completely in their interest to do that. Totally in their interests. You know, if you have business people going to school and saying, I will hire people who graduate, I'm telling you, you'll have more people graduating. Very, very simple, but very effective. I think students don't have a right to fail, and we don't have a right to let them fail. I think we have every obligation to make them pass. And again, it gets to the story of schools. To me, the story of schools should not be that people come and spend time there and then it's a toss-up. Maybe I pass, maybe I fail. That's not okay. Every second that they're there costs us money, right? Every second that they're there costs them time in their lives. Time and money are the two things that we never have enough of, correct? So if people are giving time and money to an education system, you need to get something out of that education system, and it can't be okay to say, well, maybe you pass, maybe you fail. No, it's a very simple thing. They need to pass. More than pass, they need to be prepared to be successful when they leave school. So I think that that's part of the story, and that's part of what happened in Brockton, is that the teachers changed from saying it's okay to fail, and actually we expect you to fail, and we have every excuse when you do fail, because we're a big school, we don't have money, etc. To now they say, there's no excuses, and it's not okay. They need to pass.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks.